Welcome to Dear Art Producer, a podcast connecting the photography and video community with art producers. Drawing on her agency experience some years ago, photography agent Heather Elder penned an open letter to art producers discussing the finer points of working with one another. This podcast takes that idea and will introduce you to different art producers, share the stories of their diverse career paths, explore what it means to stay relevant, and examine industry topics such as marketing, estimating, directing, websites, and more.
Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today we welcome writer and producer Sheri Rosenberg. Sheri started her career in art production, had always hosted a blog, and eventually wanted to reinvent herself. So she decided to start writing more full-time, and she's now a content and copywriter for brands directly. I've known Sheri for what feels like 100 years, and I have worked with her as both a writer and a producer and think the world of her. I always appreciate her insights and can't wait to hear what she has to say. Hi, welcome.
Hey, Heather, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. It's taken us a little while to coordinate this, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a little bit busy in 2020.
Okay, and how's your dog? I forget his name.
Khan just had 10 teeth removed, which I thought was a lot. But then I heard that they have 42 teeth dogs, so I felt a little better. So,
oh my God, he had the cutest part.
I know. Well, they kept his little snaggletooth, which is wonderful. So he's doing just fine. He's a resilient little man, which is awesome.
Well, you're going to have to send me a picture because people have started talking about their dogs on the podcast, and we've started.
I've heard that. I love that. Mm-hmm. It's my favorite subject.
You can't go wrong posting pictures of dogs.
Absolutely not. I agree. More dogs, please.
Yeah, exactly. We could use a lot more of those in the world.
Absolutely.
Well, gosh, I really meant it when I said I feel like I've known you for what feels like 100 years, because I think not just that we've been in this business for a long time, but I think it feels like that long because it's changed so much. And I know you agree because you and I have lamented over so many of those changes for so long together. But I think a good place to start today would to give the listeners a little bit of an idea of where you did start. What the beginning looked like for you.
Oh my God. So I moved to New York after college. I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to college in Philadelphia. Kind of came here, took a job in advertising, not at all producing, just sort of an assistant to these two goofball guys at this small agency. And then I kind of jumped around a little bit, believe it or not. I was a photo rep for a little bit in my career, which was great. But, it was a small office and I kind of wanted to be in more of I started calling on all these agencies and I'm like, I want to be with the cool kids. I want to go work at an agency. So I ended up at an agency in a trend forecasting department. Back when you used to answer ads in the New York Times, that's how long ago that was. And that was a whirlwind. I got to work in sort of strategy and trends for a bit, and then I think around 9/11, believe it or not, is when I pivoted and ended up being an art buyer for a Broadway type ad agency. So we did all the posters for all the big splashy musicals and stuff. And quite honestly, I've never been like much of a Broadway kind of gal, but it was such a cool experience. I got to work with all these celebs and people are so passionate about theater who work in it. It was like a really wonderful experience. I really enjoyed it. And then I feel like I really started full on producing when I moved to Miami to work for Crispin Porter Bogusky in 2004. So loaded up the car, left New York, moved to Crispin and stayed there for about 7 years. And it was like, I feel like, the golden era of that agency. And it was just a really magical time to be able to make stuff there. That was great.
Well, and having had that background in trend forecasting must have really been helpful to you as an art buyer at the time. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I graduated with a degree in journalism and anthropology, and I've always been somebody who's been very sort of like curious about patterns and trends and visual trends. And it's just, I think most people that start out in advertising or used to starting out in advertising were sort of like very pop culturally savvy people and really appreciated things that were happening in culture, advertising. I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Well, that's okay. You're important.
No, I'm trying to shut that down. Oh, sorry about that. It's a spam call.
That's all right.
Awful. I was saying that, I think like many of us came into advertising because we really love pop culture, and that's something I really loved about Crispin is they had just such a good pulse on pop culture. And that did help me, just having that trend background and being able to look at different photographers and illustrators and talent and see sort of who could be a good fit for a lot of these projects, which often were very sort of like trend focused things.
So you mentioned too that you felt like you were at Crispin during the golden age of advertising. What makes you say that?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was the golden age of advertising, but I always think about, I've talked about this with my old boss who I did trends with. She was at Heyday during sort of the heyday of when that agency did 1984 and all those amazing things. And I think there's sort of serendipitous moments in one's career in advertising. And if you're lucky enough to work at an agency that's just kind of killing it and making amazing work, and you're all kind of pinching yourselves over just how much fun you're having, even though it is, very long hours and very stressful. I just think Crispin was having a real moment at that point in time. And it was just like a really fun place to be. We were doing all of that Burger King work, Mini Cooper work, Volkswagen stuff, the Truth campaigns. It was just all eyes were on the agency. And it was like, at the time we were just in Miami. And it was just a great group of sort of like misfit kids coming together to make really creative things.
Do you remember around what years this was?
Oh, yes, very clearly. 2004 to 2011 is when I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you probably are thinking about a time when a lot of us talk about when advertising was fun. Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I can't really sugarcoat this because look, it was extraordinarily stressful and hard and we worked our butts off and there was a lot of pain involved in this too, but yeah, it was fun because I think what was most fun about that agency, well, there are a couple of things. I think a lot of people didn't come from traditional ad backgrounds who worked there. If you looked at the agency, you might think you were like on the set of Jackass, like it was a bunch of guys skateboarding around the agency. And like, it was just like a very cool kind of, almost like a punk rock kind of feel to the place, and you were like, who are these people? I was coming from New York where I had my own sort of sense of what cool was, having lived in New York for so long, but here I am in Miami with all these people from all over the country who were just doing awesome stuff. And just for the hell of it, it felt very courageous, a little bit rebellious, It didn't feel as sort of formulaic and fearful as things feel now.
Well, and I remember that time getting calls from Crispin, being very excited about the creative that came across our desk. And while the process was often chaotic and felt very fire drill-like, it always worked out to be something really amazing. And we were so excited to be a part of it and proud to show off what we ended up creating.
Well, that's what was great about it. Is like, I think we put photographers and illustrators through a lot of pain, but I think they ended up with stuff that was really great for their careers too, and for their portfolios. And it was stuff that they were excited to work on, We'd ask for the sun, moon, and stars, but it's like, oh, wow, like that's a really cool idea. I'd love to make that with you. And that's sort of how it went. And, I think we were fun to work with too. We were always up to have a great time while we were doing it.
So where did you go from there?
So, really my heart never kind of recovered from leaving New York because I'm very much a New York girl. And I always wanted to come back to New York. Miami wasn't really my place, if I can be honest, at all. I loved working at Crispin, but I never felt like a real affinity for Miami. Came back to New York. And then because of the network that I built working at that place for all of those years, I immediately started getting freelance jobs, which was wonderful, because we all had a shorthand of how to work with each other and sort of like what our tastes were and what we liked. So I started getting a lot of freelance jobs and I freelanced for a really long time. At the same time that I was winding down at Crispin and coming to New York, I started getting a lot of writing assignments on the side. So, I was hustling in every direction.
I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm feeling like that time that you came back to New York was a little bit of a heyday for the freelancers. A lot more of them were being hired. It wasn't that hard to get a freelancing gig. Am I remembering that time correctly?
Oh, you are. I mean, there were times when your phone would just be ringing and you would have 3 things maybe going on, like you had more work than you could handle. And it was busy, and you'd get these like really sweet long-term freelance gigs where you would go somewhere for like 9 months at a time if you wanted to, and you kind of had the best of both worlds. It's like, okay, like I get the kind of steadiness of being somewhere and not having to worry so much about like what I'm doing next. But you could also kind of like not be part of the politics as much and be like, well, I'm a freelancer. Don't want to get involved with that. Thank you very much.
And during this time, do you feel like you were creating similar work as you did at Crispin, or maybe more accurately, do you feel like the energy was still the same in the industry that allowed for that kind of work to be created?
No, I think you make me think of something. Thanks for bringing that up, because I think, if I'm being honest, when we were at Crispin, the work that freelancers got, if we didn't necessarily love working with freelancers there because we had such a strong DNA as a culture that it was kind of hard to indoctrinate somebody into that world very quickly and onboard them. And I think the freelancers didn't get the sort of sweet assignments, like there was a big art buying department. We would all sort of be like, well, I want to do that great assignment with that cool celebrity or whatever it was, And when I got back to New York, I started noticing it's like if you were senior enough, you would get the really great assignments as a freelancer. And you're like, oh, wow, that's incredible. Like I thought for sure as a freelancer, I would just be sort of relegated to stock searches, which I was many times. But I also got to work on like really cool projects, and that was wonderful.
Oh, that's interesting. So did that kind of inspire you or maybe encourage you to want to stick with freelance and not go on staff somewhere?
Yeah, I did do a staff gig when I came back to New York for a little bit. And I just felt like, I think freelance, Crispin was a hard act, tough act to follow for me in terms of a full-time thing. And I just felt more comfortable being a freelancer. And in the sort of background, I was also trying to figure out how I was going to do this, make a go of this writing thing, and I wanted to free up some time to be able to do that too. And some headspace for that also.
And freelance allows you to do that.
Yeah. I mean, you're still sometimes depends,
Well, tell me, let's kind of fast forward to today, right? Like you kind of set the foundation or shared your foundation of like where you got your start and what kind of grounded you in art production, the experiences that you had that shaped who you are today. But here we are today. And you don't do a lot of production anymore, and you are mostly writing, which I know is, one of your big loves. Tell me how you got there. Like, what was it that you're seeing happening in the industry? And I know this is a huge question that, a lot of us have lots of opinions on, but what do you see happening out there?
Oh my goodness. Well, unfortunately, I don't have good news on that front. I felt like for me, the work just wasn't coming in as frequently as it was, which I really was fortunate for a while. And like I said, like it just kept coming. It was wonderful. There was enough work for everybody. Then the whole notion of like, okay, like we're not really just doing art buying anymore. We want you to produce video also, like that became a big thing. And you really had to pivot as a producer and think about that. Like, is that something I want to do? To be true to myself, I really didn't want to do that. It's not that I don't like broadcast or commercials or film. It's just I loved photography. That's what I loved doing. And that's what I wanted to do. And I just started feeling like, like the work really isn't there. And I've always been, as a personality, a bit of a generalist. I've never been the kind of person that's like, this is all I do. Like I'm the kind of person that likes to change my hair every couple of months, or I like change, and I like to be able to do more than just one thing. And I think, for me to be able to pivot as a writer, I kind of had to go through a lot of steps in my mind. I thought about having a production company. What would that look like? I worked with a career coach, spent, a good amount of money on trying to find out what this was. And I was like, oh shit, like really, I'm a writer. That's what I am, and I think I was scared of it because in agency life, you're very pigeonholed into your role, and that's what makes agencies work, right? Like everybody knows they have a job to do and they do it, and on its best day, everybody's doing their job, and that's how you get so much work produced and made. But for me, I never felt like I would get an opportunity to do anything else at an agency other than be a producer. And I just, the best way I can explain is I just sort of outgrew it, I could cry that I was getting too old to be in agencies. I certainly had the sense of like, wow, everybody around me is really young and I'm not anymore, but I also felt like very creative. It's sort of, I had a sense of how to build a creative career because I was around it for so long and always had a blog and, like just kind of came about very naturally for me.
And what sort of other things were you recognizing as changing at that time? I heard you mention, obviously, it's not just about photography, it was about motion as well. I know that I can add to that. It wasn't just about the hero image, it's about creating a whole library of images. The idea of content, I feel like, was becoming the most incredibly valuable. So, how much can you get for my budget as opposed to I have this much money, can you produce these 3 shots for me? It was, the deliverables kept increasing and the budgets didn't really totally change. Were you noticing that as well?
Oh, 100%. I always think about and this was a little bit before my time too, but back in the day, we used to talk about things like, okay, like we need a billboard, we need an ad in the New York Times, maybe we're going to do a print ad, there's a TV spot, and that's kind of it. I think with the sort of predominance of social media and the internet, we were just spread so thin in terms of the things that we had to make, and it just became this thing of we just need to shoot a ton of stuff. We just, like you were saying, we just want to make tons of content. We need to just shoot a ton of images and we need to do it in a really short amount of time. And the sort of, I'm going to say the craft of the business kind of was having a hard time surviving to me, it just felt like everything became very fast and furious and the dirty word that we all now hate of scrappiness, everything has to be scrappy and fast. And that can be, that can be okay. I'm not anti fast and furious. I kind of like working at a fast pace. I don't have a problem with that. But when everything is that, it's kind of wow, and you're shooting more stuff. So you would think the budgets are going to increase to accommodate, but no, in fact, they're getting smaller,
Yeah, no, and I'm finding that in these, we're often always triple bidding. And if we don't get a job, the reasons I'm being given that we're not given a job are rarely about creative anymore. It's rarely about a choice. It's about deliverables and what you're able to get them, the amount you can give them for their budget. So
yeah. Well, it's the notion of value has really changed because what we value in the industry has changed significantly. We value more and fast versus really. I don't want to crap on the way we do things now because
I don't know. I think it's a very general conversation. It doesn't happen to everyone, but I'm seeing the exact same things happen on my end. And I think, one thing that I think is really interesting is the role of the ad agency in all of this and how that's evolving. And I'm sure, we can transition to talking about the work you're doing for brands. But one thing that I'm seeing very much so is that where an ad agency would trust, again, very general here, where a brand would trust their advertising agency 100% in the entire process, from, strategy to messaging to execution, they are now valuing their agency for creating the content. They're treating them more like a production company. Again, feeling like I need to keep saying this. This is very general. It's not happening everywhere. But if you look, you'll see that brands are bringing their advertising departments in-house. They're creating their own agencies. They're going to production companies. And they're really putting the pressure on their ad agencies to reduce their overhead, be able to be faster, be able to be cheaper, and ways that advertising agencies haven't always been used to working. So I'm seeing the difference on my end of the requests that we're getting from a variety of different agencies. I mean, it varies a lot.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think also, like, bringing up the whole agency of record versus very project-based work. I think also, well, going back a little bit, like talking about this sort of heyday of the freelancer, it's kind of like when we went from this very AOR to project-based model, freelancers were like, that's when it was all happening. It's like, oh, we can't staff up with people, but we need freelancers to make all this work, So that kind of worked in our favor. But yeah, the whole notion of what agencies provide has really shifted. I think everybody's trying to figure that out as we speak. But I will say that one of the challenges of working on the brand side is that brands are not really set up to make stuff. They're just not. And it's difficult. If you're used to sort of agency life and you shift to the other side, you can easily get frustrated with the fact of like, wow, like, it's a different animal. You don't have these sort of like rock star producers on staff who are going to help you get stuff done. It's very, very different.
So do you find you're helping them kind of carve their way and kind of figure that out, at least at the brands that you're working at that don't have the in-house agencies?
Not really, because that's not my role anymore.
Right.
Like it's hard for me sometimes. I'm like, oh, wow, like we could be doing this a lot better, but I just have to put my head down and do the job I was brought in to do. Because it's like, it's just, I think like when agencies are working really well, like I always think of an agency, maybe like when I freelanced at Wieden and Kennedy in New York, like I just loved how everything was really in service of the work there. Like everything was set up so you could make the work. And sometimes I really miss that kind of atmosphere,
And when you work at the brands directly, and whether it's experiences that you've had or you've heard from other people, what do you think those brands are valuing if they're not in service of the work? What is it that they're trying to create? I mean,
they're kind of in the same zone that everybody is. It's like they've got a million messaging channels that they have to populate, right? And it really also depends on what kind of business. I mean, this is sort of very business speaky, but it's like if you're sort of like working for a private equity brand, their whole model is like very fast to market, and that whole fast model really applies to them, and the budgets are not nearly as big as you would have in an agency. It's just not the same thing. And they're certainly not necessarily placing value on production itself. Like I know a lot of people who are working directly with brands as photographers. And I just heard a story of somebody who did a very big shoot in a foreign country. And he was expected every night to edit the film after shooting 12-hour days in another place and another time zone for about 12 days in a row. So,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's also education, like you have to educate people when you're on the brand side of like, hey, like maybe that's not the best way to do this. Or, like when you're given the opportunity to speak your mind about that kind of stuff. It's just, everything is challenging. And I think both sides have their pros and cons,
I do. And I kind of want to go back to something you said about the kind of the heyday of freelancers and how there was a time when the gig, the freelance gig was so prevalent and out there and easy to get a job. And I remember that's right when we started our freelance art producer website, because I was getting phone calls all the time from people saying, do you know any freelancers? And I was like, okay, there needs to be a website out here for people to kind of just at least put their profile up there and kind of, gather them all in one place. But then, not soon afterwards, it kind of, I don't want to say it dried up, but it got a lot harder. And all those freelancers would be calling me and saying, gosh, what do I do? what does it mean? What are you hearing out there? And I would say, I actually think it's kind of an exciting time because you're no longer an art buyer. You're an art producer. You've learned these skills, whether it be motion or content creation or libraries or whatever it is. You've learned to do more than just, produce a photo shoot. And I think we're in a time in the world where everything is about creating content. And if you can project manage that and be a strong resource as a producer, I think there is a lot of opportunity, but it's finding those opportunities in places that are different than where they're used to finding them. Production companies, brands directly, all of that sort of stuff. Do you agree with that?
I do. I mean, I think it's a different hustle, 100%. Like for me,
100%.
That's not what I wanted to do. I didn't find, honestly, I didn't find that end of the business that interesting, and I wanted to move on from it a little bit. But yeah, you're right.
Well, for the people who are questioning that themselves and are thinking am I still relevant? Or maybe I'm still relevant, but I'm looking to do something different. You mentioned that you were afraid because you were so used to being in that one role in an agency, but you had to, be confident to kind of cross over and to do something else. What were some of the steps that you took? What advice would you give to someone who's looking to kind of reinvent themselves?
Well, I think you have to be bold and not be afraid. I think I used to, I've had a blog since I'm forgetting the year that I started it, but it was a long time ago that I've had this blog. And I think I was worried about who was looking at it and the kind of things that I would say, and being very careful about saying things about my age or, being just very self-conscious about what I was writing, And I think when I started to get a lot more honest and truthful and kind of put stuff on the table, not being negative or anything like that, just this is where I am, I started to get a better response, and I think...
you were being authentic.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, just working with creatives and agencies, I had this fear almost of who does Sheri think she is? She's a writer now? Ha, ha, ha. You know what I mean? Because I think I was worried about that. It's I was only seen as a producer, but I just started barking up different trees, I haven't done a lot of copywriting gigs direct to agencies at all, but I've always had a sort of, because of the trend thing, I think I've always had a good sixth sense of where to go to look for something new for myself and where the industry is headed. And I guess advice-wise,
it's amazing that experience early on in your career has really shaped you later on in your career.
Yeah, and I just had this really big fear of getting stuck in something and getting to a point in my career where I wasn't going to be able to grow anymore. And honestly, the thing with me was I didn't really want to run a department of art buyers. I really liked making the work. I was always more of a soldier, I liked being out in the shoots and doing it, the thought of managing a group, that's kind of the only place left when you reach a certain point. And I'm that's not really for me, that's not where my head was. I always just wanted to be making stuff. So
let's talk a little bit about, you brought it up a couple of times, but we haven't explored it yet, is our age.
Mm-hmm.
And how you started writing about it and feeling about it and, where your place was in the industry because of your age.
Yeah. I mean, I remember very clearly, and this is very honest and true. It was probably about a year and a half or about a year ago, last Christmas, the one before this Christmas, and being on a very, very big shoot, for a big client, big budget, lots of days, lots of locations, lots of moving parts. And I just looked around and I'm I had this sort of Rodney Dangerfield back to school moment. It's wait, what am I still doing here? I'm the cool aunt now, and I don't want to be that. I'm not comfortable with that. And it's not anyone pushed me out or said you can't be here anymore, but it's just, I had this sense of self that I'm I don't belong here anymore. That's just how I felt. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. I don't know if there are people that still love doing it and are feeling pushed out, which is very unfortunate. But for me, I was just yeah, I think I'm kind of done with this. That's just sort of the point that I came to. And I think I feel really empowered by being the age I am, because there's you give an F about the things that really matter to you, and you don't give an F about the things that are not important anymore. So I think like
Absolutely.
you come into a really good place of like being confident in what your talents are, what your strengths are. You know what your weaknesses are, and you're just like, this is who I am. Like, here we go. And if it doesn't fit into anybody's notion of what you're supposed to be, like, who cares? So.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I had a very, very similar experience this year. I turned 50 and everyone talked about, oh, you're 50. Are you okay with 50? And I never, ever had an issue with turning 50. I always kind of had this joke, like it was, ever since I was 16 years old, like it's just a number, right? And I would say that to my parents, it's only 16 is just a number. It's if you think I'm mature enough, it's, so I always used that in my mind, like it's just a number. It's just how you feel is more important. But one thing that 50 did do for me, it is such a milestone. I also was married 25 years this year, and both of those were major milestones that it made me first look back on my life. What were these last, what were my 50 years like? And then, it, made my heart swell of, my family and my career and my husband and my friends and, the life that I built. I was very happy with looking back, but then it made me want to look forward. And what do I want my next, hopefully 50 years to look like? And part of that is what you just said and what you wrote about, all the things you give an F about. What are those? And what am I going to stand for? And what am I going to put up with? And what am I interested in? And what excites me and what makes me happy? Because if I'm going to still do this, I recognize that, I need to feel valued and be excited and want to be doing what I'm choosing to do it. I'm not just along for the ride anymore. I'm choosing this still.
Yeah. And I think when you're younger, I think there's a part of me as I was sort of coming up the ranks. I'm like, okay, like maybe this job's not my perfect job, but I'll do it for 2 years because I'm here to learn. And then I'm going to move on to something else. You kind of realize that you were investing time in something because it would take you somewhere else. Now that I'm turning 50 in July, I think about like, not because I think I'm dying, but I'm like, every second counts to me now.
Yep.
Every second counts. I don't want to spend a minute doing anything I don't want to do. I know that's not possible.
Well, you put the time in. You've now become someone and you have major value in terms of your experience and what you have to offer. You're not we're all looking to learn more and challenge ourselves for sure. But I just think we can be a lot more purposeful about what we choose to do next, as opposed to, okay, I'll just try that and I'll see how that works out because I'll add it to my, resume. I think, looking forward, like I'm incredibly purposeful about the photographers I bring on the roster, the conversations that I have, the time, the things that I invest my time in. And I think I'm proud of myself for that. And I think it's what excites me in the morning, knowing that I'm purposely choosing to do this still.
I think it's wonderful. And I will say to all the producers out there, you will be amazed if you do decide to just like pursue a career that's not production related. The skills that you have from being a producer, I wouldn't trade them for the world. They are the things I know how to do because I was a producer. It's just miraculous to me, like the way I know how to work, the way I know how to get things done.
Oh my gosh. The organization skills and the multitasking and
the way you know how to communicate and how you say something.
Skills, the therapy skills.
Oh my God. It's just unbelievable. It's such an incredible career path being a producer. You learn so much. You're so resilient. You're so resourceful. And like, any way that you turn after that, like you're going to have such great skills that set you up for your next thing. I really believe that.
My daughter is interviewing for a summer internship now at actually at an agency with a woman that I know very, very well and have known for a really long time. And it's impressive that she's been in the business as long as she has. She's started a department and is incredibly organized, and her project management skills are beyond. And I just think if my daughter could learn project management from her or anyone that she has trained, she's set. Like that is a skill that will take Casey anywhere in any job, in any career.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to say, I don't think it's just an advertising thing. Like, I just think we're at a real moment in time in culture, what we're dealing with in the country. It's everybody is sort of rethinking everything, and I think it's you do reach a certain point in your life where you just start thinking like maybe you want to reinvent, and I sort of wanted to do it on my own terms, and that was very important to me, that I wasn't going to be sort of feeling desperate about having to do it,
Yeah, no, and I think that's such a great message for people, because the not only is our industry changing, but obviously our world is changing for lots of different reasons. And I think it's okay to rethink the things we've thought for so long are just the way that it is. And it's okay to try something new and to reinvent yourself and to put yourself out there in a way you might not normally have thought to do that. And
absolutely,
I think that's okay too. I believe in that with you.
Yeah, but I will say, Heather, as a testament to you, I think like you're somebody in the industry who has always been so kind and compassionate to everyone, to your photographers, to producers, to helping people get work on all sides of the fence. And, you're so valuable. And I think you're always pivoting and trying to embrace all the new things that are coming the way of the industry. And I really appreciate that about you. You're very resilient, and it's amazing to see and watch. And I love it.
Oh, well, you're sweet. I honestly think a lot of that comes from being an only child. I was always alone unless I went to a friend's house who had brothers and sisters, and they always had people around them. And of course, they wanted to be at my house because no one was there. And here I am choosing a career where it's just me, or at least in the beginning. And I've just always wanted to surround myself with everybody else and feel like I had a sense of community, and was always so worried that being a rep, nobody would want me around because I was a salesperson that would come knocking on their door, but slowly realized there's a community of incredibly amazing, talented, wonderful, nice, kind, friendly, funny people out there. And I'm so fortunate to have them all as my friends.
And that's the thing that I will say that I miss about not doing a ton of production anymore, is I really miss that on-set camaraderie and all of the amazing people that are in it together, from the reps to the producers to the photographers. Everybody is just so incredible. Like, you really can't replicate that feeling of being on set with a great group of people, hilarious people, smart people, cool people.
There really is nothing to replace that.
No, I know. Believe me, I do. Like, whenever I get on set now, I always feel my heart racing a little bit more, because I still love that. I still love making stuff so much. If only it was that simple and we could all still just do what we love about the business, it would be.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, there were years where, I would only had a handful of photographers, and, half my day was spent going to sets and eating a great lunch and meeting good people and having fun. And that doesn't happen so much anymore, but I miss that. I do miss it.
It's supposed to be fun. I always,
I'm glad I had it when I had it.
I know. I mean, a really great producer once said to me, is like, we were in the middle of something very stressful, and he's like, you know what? At least we get to make stuff for a living. Like, how cool is that? I'm like, yeah, that's pretty awesome. Not a lot of people can do that, and I always love that about it.
Well, I'm feeling very fortunate not only to have been in this industry, but to know people like you. And Sheri, I'm so impressed with, what you've done with your career and how you've reinvented yourself. And I've always been a fan of your blog. And I'm just so glad you've been on the show today, because I think you've offered such wonderful perspective on an industry that really has no rules right now and seems to be changing so much. And I hope that our listeners can find little nuggets of things that you've said that kind of give them hope to figure out, to find their own way. So thank you for being so honest today.
You're so welcome. And when you come back to New York, drinks are on me.
Okay. I love that. As long as Con will be there, I'm in.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay. All right. I'm going to hang up, but we will talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening. In an industry where the rules are always changing, it's helpful to hear from those on the front line. Heather Elder is the visionary behind notesfromarepsjournal.com. Visit her website for industry updates, stunning photography and video, and the artist behind the work.